Howdy everybody and welcome back to the Saint Willy channel. Once again, feel free to like and subscribe, become a member, stick around for a while. If you're a fellow Willican, a true Williever, then you've probably already seen my Through the Eyes of Plants, which is a Plants vs. Zombies horror AU, and if you haven't seen it, then go watch it right now or else your soul. You've probably already seen the video I made of Through the Eyes of Plants, the Plants vs. Zombies horror AU by JHG Comics. And if you haven't seen it, then you must watch it right now, or your soul will be lost forever. Either that or you'll be lost with the context of this video. And since you guys love that video so much, I figured it was only appropriate to talk about the spin-off series Through the Eyes of Zombies that I mentioned in it. Also, I need money. But yes, today we're talking about Through the Eyes of Zombies, which is set in the same universe as Through the Eyes of Plants, and is created by VrictoPlays. And once again, this channel is all in Spanish, so I'm going to do my best to try to, give you guys a synopsis and breakdown of everything that's going on. You might have a white boy speak a little Spanish. Some español. Muy caliente. Alright, no more reindeer games, let's just get right into it and zombie walk over to Through the Eyes of Zombies. So the series opens inside of Zombos' lab, and he's over here looking like Megamind with that 5-head he has, and it wastes no time getting into it as he starts doing Hellraiser levels of torture to these poor innocent people, and he's trying to turn them into zombies by sewing rotting flesh onto them, because, Through the Eyes of Plants we established that the zombies are actually, supposed to be people. So Zombos is doing all this as a way to make his own little private zombie army to try and destroy Crazy Dave. And you might ask yourself, what's his beef with Crazy Dave? How did this all start? Why is he doing this? I don't know, man. Maybe Crazy Dave had a quinceañera one time that was too loud and Zombos just couldn't put up with it. Or maybe he's just like, ha, I'm so evil. And it's like, he's just evil. I don't know. We didn't really figure that out in the first series, Through the Eyes of Plants, so we're probably not going to figure it out here. Anyway, he takes his rust bucket, human trafficking zombus over to Crazy Dave's place, and you see the cute plants hopping around like, yay, they're so happy, everything's great. So anyway, the zombus pulls up and opens a back ramp, and these poor zombie skin people are just so lost and confused as to what's going on, but they can't really do anything about their situation because we can see that they have these like Caesar's Legion slave collars that will probably explode if they try to escape. And seeing no other option, one of the zombies tries to wave at the pea shooter plant and make friends with them and just to be nice, but things aren't as they seem as we see Through the Eyes of Plants. Get it? And the plant sees him as a horrifying zombie monster. And I'm not gonna lie, this part had me bursting out laughing because the zombie guy turns around to his group and he's like, see guys, maybe the real Plants vs. Zombies were the friends we made along the way. And then his eyeball gets shot out through the front of his face by the pea shooter and he dies. So then panic starts to set in, and one of the other zombies is like, nah man, screw this, and tries to run away and rip off his collar, but then you hear a loud beeping and his head explodes. So it just turns into a massacre with the plants like being seen as these mutated GMO monsters that start just butchering all the zombies, and it's just horrible, it's brutal. So seeing no other option, the zombies are forced to fight back, and we see this giant Sam Sulek looking zombie just crush all these sunflowers and poor little plants with his giant, telephone line. However, one of the plants explodes, and the last zombie standing decides to book it back in the zombus, and a giant bag of money falls out and lands in front of the plants as reminiscent of the game. And we have just witnessed our first Plant vs. Zombies battle. This is how it began. And the episode concludes with Crazy Dave taking one of the zombie skin masks as a souvenir and pinning it up against his wall. Pretty gnarly stuff. Going right at episode 2, we see the sole survivor zombie having these severe PTSD attacks, having to now live with the memory of seeing his friends butchered on the battlefield, and he bursts into tears. Despite him wearing a zombie mask, we can still see his tears. See, bro, it's like so deep, you know, he's wearing a mask, and you can still see his tears beneath them. That's what the mask is. That's what the point of the mask is. However, he can't rest for long as he's thrown back out into the battlefield to fight the plants once again. And we can start to notice that this is basically like a remake or a recreation of entry number 2 from the Through the Eyes of Plants series, as he smashes the lamppost plant and the zombie attack commences. But the zombie is filled with a new sense of rage and determination as he'll pick up a scaredy shroom and just crush him with his bare hands. However, he's eventually outnumbered and gunned down by the other scaredy shrooms. And then we also see a glimpse of the scaredy shroom that was the main protagonist of like the second entry, which is kind of cool. But then we see a real groovy, baby, disco zombie come out onto the scene, and he starts putting those platforms to good use. He starts stomping on them fungus like nobody's business, man. However, as the battle continues, we start to see the Hypno Shroom in action as he starts to hypnotize one of the zombies and they're forced to fight amongst themselves, and the Disco Zombie is actually pretty injured trying to take down the hypnotized zombie. And as he's laying on the battlefield about to succumb to his injuries, he hears a familiar Jack-in-the-Box tone. And my god, he is horrifying. He looks like Jeff the Killer with this sewn-in smile and eyes cut open. It's kind of gross. And if you see my first video, then you know how this ends. The Jack-in-the-Box still goes off, and the pea shooter plant that was surviving all this is horrified by this. But we see a different perspective of the battlefield now. We see the Disco Zombie watching a hypnotized Crazy Dave walk onto the battlefield. But luckily for him, he's able to scurry away. However, there's still one problem. The Disco Zombie still has a slave collar attached to him. And as the beeping gets louder and more rapid, the Disco Zombie collapses to the ground and acquiesces. And the entry ends with the collar going off. The next entry is basically just like the song we already talked about from the first video. You know, the De La Noche. That one. The one that like JHC Comics made. I guess they both uploaded it and put it in their playlist, but I thought it was still kind of funny and I wanted to bring it up again. So anyway, continuing on. So episode 3 is basically just the zombies' perspective of episode 3 of Through the Eyes of Plants. And honestly, it's kind of scarier because we see that these sentient zombie guys are aware of everything and they're being forced to fight Tangle Kelp, which is, you know, like a swamp monster. So it makes it just extra creepy to me. And they manage to like break away free from her. And when they're about to climb out of the pool, hypnotized Crazy Dave shows up and then burns them alive. However, one of the zombies survives, well, at least his upper half survives, and he tries to crawl back towards the Zombos, but Crazy Dave finds him and finishes him off by beating him over the head with a shovel, and it shows everything in like graphic detail with his head splitting open, and I'm just like, it lingers on it for like so long, dude. However, once that job is done, Crazy Dave just walks up the ramp of the Zombus and hitches it right in the back, and I guess that explains how Crazy Dave was able to find like the lair of Zombos in the original Through the Eyes of Plants series. So while Dave is executing his Trojan horse strategy, one of the zombies wakes up in Zombos's lab, and we see all of the crazy experiments he's been doing by like trying to sew multiple people's body parts together and like making all these weird zombie hybrids and variations. And hey yo, why is there a mermaid? There's a zombie mermaid in there. What's Zombos doing with the zombie mermaid? What's he doing with a 3-headed zombie swimmer? What, like, so many questions, okay? So many questions. However, it draws particular attention to this purple flurp colored glowing vat that has some creature lurking inside of it that successfully manages to break out before we cut to Zombos himself. So Zombos is just going through his daily routine of crossing out his evil to-do list of experiments that failed, until Crazy Dave pulls up and, as we've seen before, completely just demolishes his ass with a shovel and beats him nearly to death and scars and mangles his face before Dave gets a nice devious lick and cops the Zombot from Zombos and takes it for a joyride and bursts out of the lab with it. And the episode ends with Zombos wrapping up his face to cover his wounds, and he's there looking like a burned victim or Joshua Graham. I've made a couple Fallout New Vegas references like in both of the videos of this series, so I'll keep it going. Why not? So episode 4 picks up immediately where episode 3 left off, where we see Hypno Shroom controlled Dave hijacking the Zombot and going on a rampage. But then it cuts back to Crazy Dave's house on top of his roof, where all the cabbage pulp plants are fighting the zombies, and low-key, the choreography is kinda epic. Kinda lay epic. Like the pole vault zombie especially has some real sick-ass moves and be doing all the jumps and everything. I thought it was kinda sick. However, something different happens this time that we didn't see in the Through the Eyes of Plants version of events, where one of the zombies, upon seeing one of the cabbage pulp plants all wounded and defenseless, starts to break through Zombos' programming a little bit, and has a flashback back to how he was created and experimented on by Zombos. Like, Zombos is a real freak. He's like poking and prodding him, sticking him with syringes and injecting weird purple ooze inside of him. And in that moment, the zombie realizes he has a choice. He's always had a choice. And he picks up his supposed enemy and carries him to safety. Until Zombos shows up. And just when you think it's the end, when he's about to blast them with fire, the zombie manages to duck and take cover and protect the little cabbage. And honestly, it's really cute. The music adds to it as well, but it was just a really, really cute and wholesome moment, you know? Showing real compassion in war, you know, despite all the brutality, a glimmer of hope shines through. Once again, I can't believe I'm getting all poetic in a Plants vs. Zombies horror AU. I did it the first time, and I still can't believe I'm doing it now. However, all hope seems lost, and the Zombot is about to finish off the cabbage and pole vault zombie, and he smashes on the roof, and I'm assuming he kills him, but we actually don't see what happens until we cut back to Zombos' lab. Now, Zombos being all deformed and mangled like this now just makes him even more determined to try to destroy Dave, so he's about to experiment on that poor zombie we saw earlier that was strapped to the table. But just before Zombos could do any real severe cuts to him, he is saved, and we see Super Brains burst through the wall, and it's really epic, and he knocks Zombos out and rescues the zombie. However, not killing Zombos proves to be a fatal mistake. As Woody wakes up, he puts a bounty on the head of the escapee zombie and lets loose the Giga Football zombie that we saw previously. Remember the Raider Dave looking one? Yeah, him. It's giving real the Emperor and Darth Vader vibes, you know, like Darth Vader is the Giga Football zombie, and, you know, the Zombos is like the Emperor, you know, I mean, that's kind of the vibe I got from, like, him being on a lab table like that. I don't know, whatever. Cut that out. However, before the episode ends, we get a glimpse inside of the mind of Crazy Dave, who is shedding tears and is desperate to break free of the control of the Hypno Shroom that's been making him do all these crazy things. And here we are, episode 5, which is the last entry as of today for Through the Eyes of Zombies. And this series is still ongoing. I know he's working on episode 6. So again, feel free to check out the original creator as always. Anyway, let's get into it. So the episode opens with sort of a recap of some of the events we've seen so far from the perspective of Zombos. And we get a real glimpse to the sheer desperation that Zombos is going through to destroy Dave. And we also get revealed that the zombie from all the way back in the first entry, the first one we see get experimented on, the sole survivor of the first attack, actually isn't dead. And he actually is the one zombie that gets turned into Super Brains. See, Zombos was so desperate to find a new way to beat Dave that he injected this one zombie with all this experimental goo and serums, and then it created Super Brains. And that also would explain why Super Brains has a grudge against Zombos, because he's been especially brutal towards him, and it also would explain why he saved the one zombie from the previous episode, because he was trying to spare him the same fate he had to endure. So cutting back to the battlefield, we see an injured zombie who is leaning up against a wall and is trying to play dead and hide from a chomper, and this whole scene just feels like a horror movie. I'm just gonna let that scene play out. Yeah, I just really like that little sequence with Chopper, because Chopper should be scary. Like an Audrey 2, Little Shop of Horrors ass looking plant. That should be a creepy plant. I like how he utilizes that. So anyway, we cut back to the battlefield and we see some real Dragon Ball Z level fights going on until we cut to Professor Brainstorm and this one giant yellow plant. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure what plant this is supposed to be, guys, so maybe you can help me out in the comments below. I'm just going to call him Yellow Bingus. Anyway, Yellow Bingus picks up the professor, and in a real Invincible reference moment, he starts slowly crushing his head with his hands like he's Omni-Man until his eyes starts bulging out and then his head explodes. And to make matters worse, all this is going on as Super Brains is being forced to watch all of this. His friend being pulverized like this. My God. And Super Brains has a real Walter White moment after Hank gets shot, where he's kind of just like frozen in terror like this and is about to get finished off until another zombie shows up to help him. And I was trying to figure out what zombie this was. It reminds me of Infinity, but he's like too big and like that armored suit. So I'm just gonna call him Iron Zombie. So Iron Zombie starts fighting back, but is quickly sauced up by the other plants, and right when things seem hopeless and all hope is lost, Super Brains is about to be down for the count, so is Iron Zombie. Iron Zombie flips up his little predator-like wrist pad and starts typing in a sequence that sets himself to self-destruct, alright? And in a real Iron Man First Avengers ending moment, he starts snatching up all the plants and flying up into the sky to try and sacrifice himself and save Super Brains. However, obviously, Super Brains doesn't want this to happen, so he starts trying to frantically stop him, but he is unsuccessful, and the Iron Zombie explodes. And honestly, it's a real epic moment. Like the music, the tension was building up, and obviously Super Brains was trying to stop his friend from exploding. However, he ultimately was unsuccessful, and the Iron Zombie sacrifices himself for the greater good, to save his friend, I don't know, for something. And obviously after this, Super Brains is devastated. He's all alone on the battlefield, doesn't know what to do. However, when he sees that some of the plants are still left standing, he has a real Kratos God of War vengeance moment. He goes, shouts to the heavens, Zeus! Okay, he doesn't do that, but he starts massacring and brutalizing the rest of the plants. And just before he's about to rip in half one of them, he gets his damn jaw shot off. But this doesn't faze him, and he rips the plant in half. And then he notices the sunflower, from the original Plants, versus Zombies one, Sunflower Girl. He notices her laying on the wall, and just when he's about to finish her off, filled with hatred, Chopper shows up and saves the day. Sort of. He bites off Super Brain's arm, but as we've seen previously, like the schmuck he is, he gets clobbered by the Zombot. Then the Hypno Shroom controlling Dave starts laughing maniacally.
Maniacal laugh.
However, as we've seen already, Super Brain survives and manages to make a daring escape in one of the nearby buildings and tries to patch himself up. He then goes to the mirror and has a real Metal Gear Solid 5 Phantom Pain moment and looks at himself and starts reflecting on all the trauma and all the tragedy and the events that led him to this point, before he smashes the mirror in rage and collapses to the ground. He then wakes up, glances down over the building, and shoots a beam towards Sunflower Girl in an attempt to save her? Kill her, perhaps? However, we get a rather strained ending sequence with what I assume to be the Crazy Dave plant hybrid amalgamations that we saw in the last entry of Through the Eyes of Plants, float down in front of Super Brains with Zombot looming over him, and Super Brains' fate is left unknown, and a lot of unanswered questions. Like, how does he escape this? What makes him go back to face Zombos and rescue the one zombie from the lab? Many questions left unanswered for a series that's still ongoing. Like me personally, the thing I really wanted to see was how Green Shadow got crucified, like from Through the Eyes of Plants. I wanted to see how that happened. I was like, what led to that, dude? Like, And there you have it, everybody. That is Through the Eyes of Zombies as it stands today. Like I said, this series is still ongoing, so make sure to go and support VrictoPlays and also JHG Comics from Through the Eyes of Plants and Through the Eyes of Zombies. Oh my god, it's so fun. You know, it's such a fun little series. Even though it's mostly in Spanish, there's not a lot of dialogue, so it doesn't really come into play. I don't have to decipher a bunch of stuff. Even though I know all the basics of Plants vs. Zombies lore, I really wish I knew all the in-depth details of it for just years of experience, because like I said in the first video, I kind of fell off after Plants vs. Zombies 2, so some things I don't really know. I never played Garden Warfare, but I saw, gameplay and some of the stuff like that. But yeah. But thank you guys, as always, for sticking around and watching till the end. Your support always means the world. And just in case I don't see you, stay safe and have a good one. Goodbye. Alright. Kinda hungry. What do I want? Ooh. I have some smoked salmon in my fridge. Can use that. Maybe make some avocado toast with it or something, Pretty good. Anyway. I need a beer, honestly, dude. Damn, good Coors, that's what I need.